You ever get that weird urge to do something just because it feels like a stupid idea, but a fun one? Yeah, that's basically how that night happened. I didn't expect anything unusual. None of us did. It wasn't supposed to become one of those memories that stick in your mind for years, the kind you randomly think about at night and wonder why it felt so heavy. But here I am, telling this story like it's carved into my brain. And honestly, it kind of is. It all started on a regular Saturday. Early fall, not too cold yet, just that cool, crisp air that makes you want to grab some snacks, pick up your friends, and drive somewhere outside the city. You know, mind reset type of night. We weren't planning anything crazy, no ghosts, no thrill-seeking nonsense, just a drive, music, road drinks, messing around, the usual 20-something vibe. There were four of us, me, Adam, Mark, and Jason. Not going to oversell the relationships. We weren't a movie-like tight group of brothers, but we hung out enough to call it friendship. I'd known Adam since middle school. Jason, met him through a job. Mark, friend of a friend that kind of blended into the group over time. Simple, casual crew, no drama, just people who enjoyed not being home. I was the driver that day. I remember the feeling of my hands on the steering wheel, warm from the sun. We left around late afternoon, just before sunset. The sky looked clean, just a few long pink clouds across the horizon. One of those skies that make you think life's pretty all right. Music was loud, mostly classic rock and some indie tracks Adam kept adding into the queue for the vibe. We joked, we talked about nothing important. You know that type of mood when everyone's good and the world feels easy? That was us. The plan was simple. Head out to a spot Adam knew near the woods, something like a picnic spot by an old river. Cook some stuff, hang around, maybe stay late enough to see the stars. Normal. And honestly, everything felt normal. Completely normal. For a while. The drive was maybe an hour long. As we got farther from the city, streetlights became less frequent, then disappeared completely. The road went darker, just headlights slicing through the trees. I remember how quiet the outside looked. No houses, no people walking, just long black lines of forest hugging both sides of the road. It's funny, silence isn't scary until you notice it. And I noticed it right when music paused between tracks. Just that second of nothing. The kind that makes you inhale a bit deeper without thinking why. We ended up taking a turn onto a smaller side road. Gravel under the tires, dust trailing behind us. My phone signal dropped at some point, 1 bar, then none. Not surprising outside the city, but it added to that isolated feeling, like we were further away than planned. Jason joked earlier that he should have downloaded more songs offline, but now even that joke felt different. Not scary, just noticeable. The sunset faded out quicker than expected. 1 second, the world was orange and gold, and the next, it felt like someone dimmed the brightness. The forest swallowed the light, you know? It always does. Trees have that weird way of making evening feel like night. We reached a clearing eventually. Parked the car near what looked like an old concrete roadblock with graffiti. Nothing special, just something you'd expect outside an abandoned industrial area. We got out, stretched, talked a bit. Everyone looked chill. Then Mark pointed out something behind the trees. At first, I barely saw it, just a shape, a rectangle of darkness among darker shadows. But when we moved closer, it took form. A building, big one, long, gray, washed out, with broken windows like empty eyes. No lights, no signs, just walls, silent and tired. An old sanatorium. I'd heard rumors about it somewhere before, maybe online, maybe from someone at school years ago. The kind of casual mention like, oh yeah, there's that abandoned hospital thing outside the city, people used to sneak in. I never cared enough to remember details. But standing there, I felt that tiny spark of curiosity you get when you see something you're not supposed to enter. No one said, let's go inside out loud first. We just stood there, all four of us staring. The place looked dead, like it hadn't seen people in decades. Yet it didn't feel empty. And that's where it began, that little discomfort you brush off with a laugh. We weren't scared, not yet, just intrigued, stupidly intrigued. We carried food and stuff toward the clearing, set up near some stones like a makeshift spot. There was still just enough light to see without flashlights, but shadows stretched longer with each minute. Conversation stayed easy. I remember how the road changed the moment we left the main highway. The asphalt became cracked, then turned into a narrow lane of old concrete slabs, faded and broken like they hadn't been repaired since the 90s. On both sides, tall grass, almost waist-high, and trees leaning inward like the road was slowly being swallowed by the forest. It felt like driving into a place that didn't want visitors. You know that weird tension you feel when you walk into someone's home uninvited? It was like that, but stretched over several miles. We joked about it, sure, or at least tried to, but even those jokes sounded forced. Halfway down the road, the reception on our phones just died. Not like low signal, literally nothing. Empty bars. It wasn't creepy at first, more annoying than anything. But then the silence kicked in. No cars passing by, no distant hum of traffic, just the sound of our engine and the occasional crack of branches as we slowly drove deeper into the forgotten part of nowhere. Eventually, we reached what looked like the remains of an old gate, just two rusty pillars with half a crooked metal arch still clinging on top. No sign, no name, as if whoever lived there didn't care to be known. Beyond it, a dirt road with deep ruts from rain. We had to continue on foot. The moment we stepped out, it hit me. That smell of old wood, damp soil, and something else, like iron. Maybe just rust. Maybe I was already psyching myself out. Everyone walked ahead, laughing loudly, almost too loudly, as if trying to push away that growing discomfort. I tagged along, but my mind kept drifting back to those rumors. Kids disappearing, strange lights in the woods, a man with no face wandering near the river. Obviously bullshit. Internet horror stories are full of that stuff. But the place, it had a way of making even nonsense sound believable. The path led us through a row of abandoned houses, or what used to be houses. Some had collapsed roofs, others still stood, windows dark like empty eyes, doors missing, paint peeled. Every step we took stirred dust and dry leaves. It didn't feel like people simply moved out. It felt like they left fast. Furniture inside one home was still there. A cup lay on the table, cracked. A jacket hung by the door, like someone walked out for a minute and never came back. I kept telling myself it was just time and weather, nothing more. But there was something wrong with the silence. Even the birds kept their distance. No chirping, no insects, just the sound of our footsteps in the wind pushing through broken shutters. One moment stuck with me most. We stayed near that old community building longer than we planned. Not because it was comfortable, no. The place felt like a postcard from another decade, but because none of us really wanted to stand up and go deeper. It was like taking a breath before diving underwater. You know that moment when everything in you says maybe that's enough, but something pushes you anyway? Eventually, we picked up our bags and moved on. The last bit of sunlight was fading, turning everything around us into softer shapes, darker edges. Shadows melted together, and the whole village looked less like a set of houses and more like a single massive shape, sleeping and waiting. We walked quietly, almost tiptoeing, even though no one said we should. The deeper we went, the more personal the ruins felt. Toys still lying in yards, a tricycle without one wheel, a rusted mailbox stuffed with old newspapers, dates barely legible. Inside one house, we peeked through a broken window and saw wallpaper with little blue flowers peeling off like old skin. A calendar on the wall, faded, stained, stuck on a month from years ago. Something about that calendar hit harder than everything else. People lived here, had plans, had schedules. Kids went to school. Someone waited for payday. Someone cooked dinner. And then, nothing. We took pictures, not to prove anything supernatural, just to capture the feeling of the place. I remember lifting my phone to frame one shot of a long, narrow corridor inside a house. The hallway stretched into darkness, floor covered in plaster and broken glass. It felt like staring into a throat, narrow, silent, breathing somehow. I hesitated before taking the photo because part of me expected to notice something strange only after looking later. You know those photos where you swear there's someone standing in the background, even if there's no one there? It was like that, a quiet dare to my own nerves. I clicked the photo anyway. Nothing moved, nothing happened, just an empty hallway. But my hands felt cold after that. Somewhere behind another house, we found an old shed with the door half open. I remember standing there thinking how stupid it would be to go inside. Dark, cramped place in the middle of nowhere. That was every horror movie mistake ever. And yet, one of the guys pushed the door gently with his foot, and the rusty hinge screamed like someone waking from a long sleep. Inside, it was nothing special. Broken tools, a dusty chair, a rope hanging from a nail. But the way the shadows filled that shed made it feel like someone was standing there watching, just out of sight. My head knew it was empty. My body didn't believe it. We kept moving until we reached the backyard of another house, and the grass there was weird, pressed down, like something heavy lay on it recently. Maybe a fallen branch, maybe an old piece of furniture that someone moved, but when I looked closer, it almost looked like a large footprint. Not human, not animal, just a wide, sunken area. Of course, it was just the ground settling. It had to be, but I avoided stepping on it anyway. We spread out our sleeping bags in the center of the village. Not inside any house, not near the trees, just right there on the cracked pavement where the moonlight could reach us. It felt safer somehow, being out in the open where we could see anything approaching. Funny how daylight makes you curious, but darkness makes you defensive. In the daylight, we were explorers. At night, we were just people who walked too far into a place they didn't belong. We tried to act normal, laughing quietly, scrolling our phones, pretending the cold breeze wasn't crawling under our clothes. But under every sound, I could feel tension. Like the village was holding its breath, waiting. The lack of city noise was the worst part. No cars, no distant voices, no hum of life. Just wind, leaves, and us. When you're used to constant background noise, real silence feels almost unnatural. Heavy. A silence with a pulse. We sat in a loose circle, flashlights pointed toward the ground, creating that yellow pool of light we all unconsciously stayed inside. No one said, let's stay close, but we did. Every now and then someone shifted, and footsteps on gravel sounded too loud, like breaking the quiet was a crime. Once I turned off my flashlight just to see what pure darkness looked like. I clicked it and instantly turned it back on. The world disappeared in less than a second, swallowed whole, and I didn't like the feeling of not being seen, or not seeing. Hours passed slowly. One of us tried to nap but couldn't. I remember lying back looking at the sky. The stars were brighter than I'd seen in years. Clear, sharp, countless. Beautiful, but cold. I kept thinking how strange it was. A place once full of people now belonged only to wind and insects. A whole life erased. We weren't supposed to be here, not because something would happen, but because it felt wrong to disturb what time had sealed. At one point, I stood up to stretch my legs. Just walked a few steps away from the group, not far, maybe 10 feet, but it felt like crossing a border. The darkness beyond the circle of light looked thicker, like fog, even though the air was dry. I stared into it, just listening. Not for danger, but for anything. A branch snapping, a distant voice, a stray dog. There was nothing. And somehow nothing was harder to take than something. You know that moment when the night gets colder than it should be? When your jacket stops working and the air feels sharper, like it's biting instead of brushing? That's how I felt around 2 or 3 in the morning. Maybe we were just tired,
Maybe nerves made everything stronger. But I started hearing things. Not actual sounds, more like
When the sun finally pushed itself over the rooftops, the whole place looked different. Less like a horror movie set and more like just an old village that life had forgotten. The shadows retreated, colors returned, and suddenly everything we feared at night felt almost embarrassing. It's strange how daylight rewrites the story in your head. All those sounds, that heavy silence, the feeling of being watched, now it seemed like nothing more than nerves and imagination. Just darkness doing what darkness does best. We packed our stuff slowly, not because we were tired, though we were, but because no one wanted to be the first to admit the night got under our skin. There's something about pride that won't let you confess you were scared of empty houses and a bit of wind. But when one of the guys dropped his flashlight and it clattered across the pavement, we all jumped slightly. Just a little. And someone laughed. Too loudly, too quickly. It broke the tension, and then we all laughed. The kind of laughter that feels like relief escaping your chest. The kind that says, we survived nothing at all, and still it feels like an accomplishment. We joked about the shed, the wardrobe, the calendar stuck in time. We replayed moments from the night, exaggerating them, turning fear into humor like people do when they need to stay brave. Someone said the footsteps I thought I heard were just mice, or my own heartbeat echoing in my skull. Probably true. Or maybe just the explanation we preferred. Either way, it made everything lighter. Before leaving, we decided to look around one last time. Not into houses. We didn't feel the need to prove anything. Just a slow walk toward the road we came from. The morning was quiet but warm, and birds were chirping like they had always lived here, like the village belonged to them now. The same places that unnerved us hours earlier now felt oddly peaceful. Still abandoned, still decaying, but harmless in the daylight. Normal. We took a group photo at the entrance sign, smiling wide, even though inside the memory of the night still sat heavy. I remember looking at the picture later and thinking how tired our eyes looked. Not scared, just thoughtful, like we understood something we couldn't quite explain. On the way back to the cars, the path through the overgrown grass seemed shorter.